Thank you, Ashley. I'm going to start with a PowerPoint. It will be brief. If anybody has seen one of my webinars or taken classes, you know that I'm not heavily into PowerPoints, but it's a good lead in to what I'll be demonstrating in the software itself. So I'm going to go over 7 new features / enhanced features. You're going to notice that, you know, just like the past couple of releases with AutoCAD, there isn't any, you know, brand new commands, let's say, that are going to jump out and grab you. But I will personally attest to that they've made some really nice enhancements to existing commands, some of the things that the user community has been asking for a long time. One of the brand new features is the drawing history, which I will cover. They've enhanced the block palette, which they incorporated a couple of releases ago. The quick measure tool has been enhanced to look at areas in other parts of the drawing. You're going to notice trim and extend for any longtime AutoCAD users out there. The enhancements that they've made for that, that's one in particular that the user community has been asking for a long time. And they've added some new features to the revision cloud, the break at point command, and they have added an Xref Compare similar to the drawing compare from release 2020. So as far as your history is concerned, if you save a drawing or drawing files to OneDrive, Dropbox, or Box account, additional versions of these files are created as you work, creating a version history. And that's what this is all about. It doesn't create a new file, which is kind of nice. It just keeps a history of the existing file. You can output one of the revisions to a brand new drawing file, but it's not like it keeps a history and then creates a new file each time. It looks at your current drawing. We have a palette for that, which I'll show you all of this in the demonstration in the software itself. And you're going to see every version listed in the palette. And there's a lot of nice features on how you can filter through the different versions as well. The block library, you can now specify a folder along with a drawing file, or any block definition for that matter, that's stored in a drawing. So you're going to see how I've created some folders with blocks in them. And when I create a brand new drawing, I can just load those folders and have each one available. And I can switch back and forth between them. The quick measure option now supports the measuring of an area and a perimeter. And it's within a space enclosed by the objects. So your boundary essentially. And you're going to see a nice part of this feature, this enhanced quick measure, because they did add the quick measure last year. The enhancement is that I can now do the areas, but I can also include or exclude islands that might be sitting inside that area. So gone are the days where you have to run your area command and either pick on a polyline or pick individual points. You're just going to hover your cursor inside of a boundary, and it's going to show you what that area is immediately. Trim and extend, this is the big one to me. This is probably my favorite new feature, even though it seems trivial to say that. But they've gotten rid of the fact that you have to select your boundaries first. And this was a big one. The same thing with the extend as well. You know, for years I've taught the AutoCAD class, and one of the hardest things to get used to for new users is selecting those cutting edges or the boundaries first before you actually select your objects. Don't have to do that anymore. It's kind of like when you go into the trim or extend command and you select everything, which I've been doing for a long time when it says select objects as far as your cutting edges or boundaries are concerned. Don't have to do that anymore. Nice part is, for you very, very experienced AutoCAD users, you can still resort back to the way that it previously worked as well. Nice thing about AutoCAD, they usually enhance and expand on commands, but they never take anything away. New revision cloud. This is a small enhancement, but it is nice. They can include a single value for the arc chord lengths, the distance between the endpoints of each arc segment. So you can change the physical size really easy. And there's also a system variable, a new system variable in here that you can set as far as the chord lengths and the distances in that as well. And then we have the break at point command. This command has been around forever inside of AutoCAD. You have the break command, you have the break at point command. Break at point, if you've used it, you know how to use it, obviously. The most difficult part about using it is, a lot of it was eyeballing. You couldn't give precise or exact measurements of where you wanted to break something. We can now use our object snap tracking along an arc, which I'll show you. So the precision of the break at point command is vastly improved. And another feature that you might laugh about in the PowerPoint here is that you can now repeat the command by pressing enter. Previously, when you went to one of the break commands and you hit enter, because as we know, when you hit enter, it always repeats the last command, but it would always resort back to the generic break, and then you would have to select your options. Well, now the break at point is repeatable as well. Seems trivial, but it's actually a really nice enhancement. And then the last one is the Xref Compare. And this is similar to the drawing compare feature. You can now compare the changes made to a drawing file attached as an Xref in the current drawing. Any changes to that reference drawing are compared by you'll see a highlight with a revision cloud wrapped around it in the compare. And it works similar to the drawing compare in the sense that you can choose different colors as far as distinguishing what has been modified, what hasn't, just like the drawing compare does. So the Xref Compare is a brand new feature, and like the drawing compare and the drawing history for that matter, these to me very nice brand new features as opposed to just an enhancement. So without further ado, let me go into the software and demonstrate some of the stuff that I was just referring to. Let me close this drawing down real quick here, because I want to include that in the demonstration. And the first one that I did talk about is the drawing history itself. And I'm going to open up that file that I just closed down, and notice that it is stored in my Dropbox, because like I said in the PowerPoint, you can use Dropbox, you can use Drop, or you can use the Microsoft OneDrive for this enhancement. So I'm going to open this up from here. And if there has been changes to different revisions, when you first open up the file, a lot of times in the lower right corner down here, you'll get a pop-up like you do with other features. If you don't get that pop-up, you can go to the View tab up top there, excuse me, and I have this drawing history. And you're going to see as soon as I turn the drawing history on, no drawing versions or, that initial alert there in the palette itself just reiterated the fact that it has to be up on, the cloud, meaning the OneDrive, the Dropbox, etc. So here's a running history of this particular file. And from the drawing history palette, I can pick on any one of these time or dates to see what the differences are between one of my revisions and as the current drawing is that I have open. So as an example, I'll go back to the very first time I created this or saved it, and I pick the compare. And as soon as I pick the compare, it's going to, bring up the compare. And notice that it doesn't really show me anything right here because I've since, deleted what I might have added as an example. If I want to end it, I can pick here. If I select the next one as an example. And sometimes you'll get an alert that there is none. Now here's an example during this revision that, in this particular instance, somebody drew a line, or I drew a line through here, and it has the revision cloud around it. If I pick the gear symbol up here, this is similar to the drawing compare in the sense that, you have a color. So anything in red is not in the current drawing. As you can see, I can toggle that on or off as well. I could change the color just like you do with the drawings compare. And then if it was green, it would only be inside of this drawing. If it's gray, there's no differences. So very similar to the drawing compare, the history compare is very similar. If you're done looking at it, I can hit the exit compare and move on to another one. Let me pick one up here where I have several changes, I believe anyway. And here's one where there's a couple of them. And this would be a case where, I wrapped a revision cloud around something to make a note to somebody. And each time I do this, as you can see, I'm going through every single history inside of the drawing itself. If I want to turn this back off, I can pin it. And as you can see here, this would be a case in this particular instance where I had, maybe several changes. I can scroll through those changes from the toolbar up here by hitting the next option. And that will just go through each one, as you can see, and then finally start all over again. So you can get a visual effect of what those changes are from that particular date. Now, as part of the drawing history palette, up here, I could also filter by date. You might have a long history here. It might have several dates involved. You might know, hey, show me the history or show me what I changed, on a certain date. So you could highlight that date and filter down. If I pick, the 12th, and I close this, here's all of these that I did today. These were from yesterday. Also, depending on how many people that are working on this drawing, remember it's up on the cloud. You can give access to other people to it. Maybe I want to access the revision history of just what changes that Tom Smith made. So I can do that as well. In this case, I'm the only one here. You can also use this, as you can see, filters by time between versions. So as I scroll over, as you can see, it knocks it down. Here's the past hour. Here's 4 hours. Here's 24 hours. So these are just ways to filter through the history, again, especially if you have a long history of making changes inside of here. I can also, from here, import objects from compared drawings. So my current drawing right now, as you know, doesn't have these revision clouds in it. I could select import objects from compared drawing, select on them, and now they would be part of the drawing itself, as you can see. Notice I can still use the undo command while I'm in this particular version. I just hit undo twice to get that back. So if you wanted to get something back from a previous release, then you could import those. And then here I can export the snapshot to a new drawing. So this would be a case where if I did want to create a new drawing of the changes that I did make from this particular date and time, I could do that and create a separate drawing of it. So by default,
it's a good way to use up things, right?
well, by default, you know, it's not going to create the new drawing for you. As you can see over here, it's the same drawing. It's not creating a new one. But if you did wanted to export all of those, you could do that as well. And when you are done with your version compare, your history compare, you exit and you're back up and running like you normally would be. The next one I'm going to talk about is the block library. I'm just going to close this down. And I'm going to start a new drawing in this particular case. And I'll just use a blank template. And if I go to my home tab and I pick the insert pull down, I could pick recent blocks or blocks from libraries, either one of these. And it brings up your blocks palette. Now, one change that they did make is down here, this tab now reads libraries. It used to be called other drawings. They've changed it to libraries for a good reason. And that reason is that now I can add either single drawings to my library or a whole folder. So as you can see here, I've got two folders in here. Right now it's currently looking at the blocks_1. If I switch it to blocks, here's all the blocks that live inside of that particular folder. So these are the individual blocks, individual DWG files. If I want to add another folder to this, I can simply pick here, and then I can navigate to where my folder is that I want to add, select it, pick open, and it will immediately default to that particular folder. So now I have up to 3 folders of blocks, you know, 3 libraries I could consider it as. And it's nice to have the separation between them because, as you longtime AutoCAD users know or experienced ones know, however you set up your blocks, whether it's inside of one drawing that you use in Design Center or a folder, if it is a folder, you know, or a DWG file, usually you're going to organize those, you're going to manage them. So in this case, you know, I could have an electrical block library, I could have an architectural, I could have a mechanical, but I can load those separately and flip-flop back and forth between the ones that I want. And once you do narrow in on the one that you want, it works the same as it did before in the sense that I can left click, hold, drag, drop into my drawing, and I'm good to go. You can also change the appearance up here. If I wanted to include extra large icons, medium, small, I'm still a details guy or a list guy, you can change that to any way you want. It's one of those personal preferences. And then obviously, none of this changed down here if you didn't want to drag and drop it into your drawing. And you can always preset scale factors, the rotations, and all of that. So it's really about this libraries tab where they've made the enhancements to the block palette in general. The next one I'm going to talk about is the quick measure. And I love this new feature, or enhancement, as I should say, because it is an enhancement. They added the quick measure tool in 2020. Let me close out the blocks palette here. So on my utilities panel, when I go to the measure pull down here, we have quick. This is what was added in 2020. So as you know, when you place your crosshairs in any area, you're going to see all kinds of distances pop up for a good reason. That's what this quick distance or measure tool is all about. Well, what they've added is now, let's say my crosshairs are inside of here, inside of this boundary somewhere, and I do a single left click of my mouse button. As soon as I do that, it gives me the area, as you can see. It's both at the tooltip, or the dynamic input, if you will, and you can see it at my command line. As soon as I move my cursor outside, once again, it's just back to its normal quick measure utility. So if I pick again inside of here, maybe this time I want to remove the islands out of the equation. Maybe I want to include the total area. So in that case, I hold my shift key down and I can pick inside this boundary. It's changed the area already and picked inside of this boundary. Let go of my shift key. So that's nice in the sense that, you know, sometimes those islands are very important where you don't want to include them, but other times you want to get a total area. We can do that with this particular enhancement. And again, as soon as you drag your cursor away, it will disappear. But wherever you see a boundary, you know, I pick inside of here. There must not be a boundary inside of there. Anywhere it sees a boundary, it'll pick up that particular area, just like it did over here. The next one I'm going to talk about is the trim and extend command. This is one of my favorite ones. Let me go over to this drawing. And again, like I said, this seems trivial, but to me, it was a big enhancement. So right off the bat, if I go to my trim command, I'll zoom in to this area a little bit closer. As soon as I put my cursor near any object, as you can see, I don't have to select the cutting edges first. It's going to assume what the cutting edge is. So I could get rid of this one, I could get rid of this one, I could get rid of this one. Doesn't matter. It will always default to the cutting edge itself. And the same holds true with the extend. If I undo this and I go to extend this time, maybe I want to extend this arc to that circle. Again, I didn't have to pick the boundary first. Pick your object that you actually want to extend. And this is what I always used to refer to if I was teaching a base AutoCAD class. When you first go over the trim and extend commands, for a long-time AutoCAD user, it's second nature to select that cutting edge or that boundary. But for a new user, that was very difficult to get used to. Because the way our brain works is we want to actually select the object that we want to trim or extend first and be done with it. So we could never do that. If you are a longtime AutoCAD user, if you look down at the command line, as you can see, I could run this in a standard mode. So one of the options at the command line is mode. When I pick mode, I'm not going to change it. But if I wanted to, it's defaulting to quick right now, which is the new feature. But if you want to change it back to the way that it was, that's fine. Change it back to standard, and it will work exactly like you're used to having it work right now. Some of the other features as part of trim and extend as well is it will default to a fence mode, meaning if I don't pick an object, and I'll do this two different ways. If I left click and hold my mouse button right now, the lasso kicks in. As we know, they added this a few releases ago. But this lasso is acting like a fence. So if I come over to this side, and as soon as I let go, all of those objects are already trimmed. And it defaulted to that. It's not like I had to type in F first or pick fence from the command line. If I undo, if you're not a big lasso person, if I go back to trim and I do a single left click, but I don't hold it, now it's just a regular fence, like we're used to drawing straight lines. And notice that it gets rid of it right away. If I pick here and I draw a fence through both of these and I pick again, it's gone. Still keeps me in the command. Let me just undo from there. And of course, you can still select a crossing as well, or type C for crossing window. If I go to crossing, I can easily just put a crossing window through a whole bunch of objects as well. So that option is still there. Also, as part of trim, is the exclusion of hatch patterns. So as an example, if I go back to the trim command, and in the old days, if I would have picked a line right here, would have trimmed it right between those two hatch lines. Well, now as you can see, it sees the boundary itself. So I can pick the line right here to trim, and it won't take the hatch into consideration at all. Now, the unfortunate part is that doesn't relate to the extend command. Let me trim that again. So now if I go to the extend option and I pick this, notice that it will find the hatch lines themselves. So maybe that's going to be one of the new enhancements in 2022 when they make it work like trim as far as hatches are concerned, or when hatches are in the way. So if you still want to run the trim and extend command the way you're used to running them, remember, just go to mode, change it back to the way that you want. And also keep in mind too, even without changing the mode to standard, if I wanted to select the cutting edges first, I could do that right from here. I would just pick cutting edges as an option. It used to be the default where you had to select your cutting edges first or your boundaries in the extend, but you can still say, hey, go ahead and select my cutting edges first. That's fine as well. So, like I said, seems trivial, but I was really excited about that particular enhancement that they made. No more having to, select a whole bunch of cutting edges and start picking away at what you do want to trim or extend. The next topic I'm going to talk about is the new revision cloud. And I've got a drawing open over here. Here, I'll go back to this particular drawing. And this isn't a huge enhancement, but it is an enhancement. As an example, if I go to my revision cloud command itself, and I start to draw one, I'll pick right here. And as you can see, notice how large, that revision cloud is as far as the arc chord length is concerned. Well, first of all, one of the new features of the revision cloud, if I go to my properties, notice that it truly is its own object now. It's called Rev Cloud, not just a polyline like it used to be. And if I want to change that arc length, obviously it's way too big for what I want to do inside of this drawing. Right now it's set to 45 feet. Well, let me change that to, let's say, 10 feet and hit enter. Now it's starting to look like a real cloud. If I want to change it to 5 feet from here, I can change it to 5 feet from here. I'll hit escape to unselect it. Now when I go back to the Rev Cloud command, notice it's going to follow the same chord length as it did from when I just changed it. So I changed it in the properties for this one, but it will apply to any other revision cloud that I put into the drawing itself. There's also a system variable that they've added to the Rev Cloud itself. And if I type it in at the command line as an example, Rev Cloud variance. This is a new system variable right here. And notice that mine is set to on. But what this does is it controls whether Rev Cloud arcs are created with varying or generally uniform chord lengths. So you could shut that off if you didn't want that feature on. So that's a new system variable you might want to pay attention to there if you do a lot of revision clouds. The next one I'm going to talk about is the break at point command. If I go back to the drawing where I have my arcs and lines and hatch pattern here, this is another one of my favorite features in the sense that we've always had, obviously, break and break at point. Break at point command appears to basically be the same command, but it's not. They have enhanced it. Now notice right now before I go into the command that my object snap and my object snap tracking is on. And the real enhancement to the break at point is about precision. So if I select break at point, just as an example, if I pick this arc right here, and then it says specify break point. I'll pick the end point here. That doesn't do a thing, obviously. Now, if I go back to break at point and I select the same thing, now with my object snap and my object snap tracking on, I can trace to where this is going to go next. So if I want to break the arc, let's say right here, or notice that it's picking up on the midpoint over there. If I want to turn my object snap off at this point, I can do that. So maybe I want to trace it right to here. So now I've got the arc here and I've got the arc here. If I have a straight up line object like I do up here, when I go to the break at point command, I'll select it here. And if I want to, for the second point, I can go to the midpoint. So I'm using an object snap. There's one, there's two. I'll undo that. And you can also type in precise measurements. So I'll go to break at point, select it once again. And now from here, let me turn my object snap back on. So if I point my cursor in this direction as an example, and I'll type in, let's say, I don't know, 30. Whoop. Let me do that one more time. Maybe I'm going too big there. Select it one more time. And then move my cursor over to here. Let's say, type in, let me turn my object snap back off, type in the 30, and now it's that exact measurement. And that's the whole point of the break at point enhancement, is it's a lot more accurate. Before it was a lot of eyeballing. And then The new feature that they talk about that it listed in the PowerPoint there is, if I hit enter on my keyboard right now, notice at the command line, it takes me directly back to the break at point command. When you did that before, whether you ran the break or the break at point command, it would just bring up the generic break command, and then you would have to go through the options of choosing either break or break at point. Now, when you go to break at point specifically on your command line or from the icon like I did, if you want to repeat the command, you hit enter, it's going to bring up the break at point immediately. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is the Xref Compare. I've got this drawing right here. And I'm going to go to my Insert tab up top, and I'm going to attach an Xref. I've got this elevation drawing right here. I'll pick open, say okay to all the defaults here. And I'll drop this into the drawing. Doesn't really matter where for this particular instance. And I'll drop it in right here. So now I'm going to open that drawing, open the Xref. And that is located in my AutoCAD 2021What's new. So I'm going to open it as its own individual file. And let's say I make some changes to this. I'm just going to do something real simple here, like maybe I want to put a chimney on the top of the roof. So I'll just draw a rectangle, let's say from here over to and up to just eyeballing it right to here. And maybe I know I want another door that would eventually go in this area. So I'll just draw another rectangle. I'm just doing basically anything to make a change to the drawing itself. So I'll put another door in eventually that will go right there. So I've made some changes to the file itself. Close it down, say yes to changes. I'll go back to the drawing where I just inserted this, and you're going to notice that in the bottom right corner, you get the pop-up. An Xref was modified. This is what's brand new here. Compare the changes. That's checked on. So if I choose to compare them, just like with the drawing compare, very similar to the drawing history, now I can actually see what changes were made to the Xref. And if I zoom in on one of them, you know, it wraps the revision cloud around what changes were made. And just like with drawing compare and DWG history, you've got your color schemes and whatever it is that you want to turn on or off. So if it's in red, it's not in the current Xref. If it's green, it's only the current Xref. So if I decide to shut that off, as you can see, it goes away. If I wanted to change the color, obviously, I could change the color as well. If it's gray, then there's no differences. Like I said, this particular palette is no different than your drawing compare from release 2020 or the DWG history compare when you run that as far as AutoCAD 2021 is concerned. And just like the DWG history, let me turn that back to the pin. And if I pick this, it just zooms back and forth, or however many changes that you had in the Xref. It's a handy tool to navigate around the drawing to see what those changes were that were made. When you are done with it, just like the DWG History and the Drawing Compare, you can exit the Xref Compare. And now it's back to the normal drawing. So those are my seven, let's say, favorite new features. One other thing I want to add too, hopefully nobody will laugh at this, but I think they did a real good job with the help menu this time around. And I've always been frustrated with this in the past. You know, not that any of us like to go to the help menu, but I would always visit the help menu when a new release would come out, just to see what's new in AutoCAD 20, you know, whatever release that it is. You know, a lot of times it would just give you a list of commands, not much of an explanation. You might have to dig further into the help menu system to find it. They actually did a real good job, in my personal opinion, of what has been added. So it doesn't just tell me, you know, trim and extend. They threw some options in there. There's good explanations. There's examples. What changed as far as the command is concerned? It will list all the new system variables that might be related to an enhancement or a new feature. Just like the Rev Cloud. Here's, I talked about the Rev Cloud system variable here. It lists it. I could go right to that particular topic and get more information about it. So every single enhancement in the help menu, you can get a ton more information. Everything that I just demonstrated to you is in here, and it has some good explanations, good examples, lists what the new command might be and any system variables that might be part of it. So don't be shy about looking at that. What's new in 2021 from the help menu standpoint. All I did to get there, just like we've always done. Oh, wait a minute. I just go to my help right up here, normal help. It's got what's new, and then that's it. And then you can go from here, obviously, as well, as far as how far you want to take something. So if you want more detailed information on everything that I just demonstrated, don't be shy about going to the help menu to find that. Okay. That's all I've got. Clayton's probably been hammering away at all the questions. Don't know. But if you have questions, hopefully you've been asking them as you've been going along. If not, you can ask at any time. Does anybody have any questions? I'm just trying to open up the question portion of the there we go. So I'm just opening up the question portion of the go-to meeting area here. Looks like we've had several. And it looks like Clayton's done a great job of answering those. One here, will the library work in AutoCAD Civil 3D? That I don't know. That we would have to get back to you on. Is there a way to set the default view list on the block palette? Yes, there is. When you go to options, under the files tab here, here's your block's recent file location. You can set that to whatever it is that you want to set it at. I just lost the presentation. There's a question. Hopefully they got it back. Like there's a few more here. Did they link the help menu to videos to show how to use something? Sometimes in the help menu, you'll come across small videos, but it's not like it's going to be linked to, you know, the AutoCAD YouTube channel with a explanation of it from there. Whatever is inside the help menu itself, just like when you know, a lot of times if you hover your cursor over an object, you know, sometimes a little video will pop up right here. Same thing holds true for 2021. That is a great idea, though. I love that idea. Is the new version going to provide digital signature? That I'd have to get back to you on. Did I cover the Purge feature? No, they haven't made any enhancements to that. They greatly improved the Purge command in 2020, and all of those are, you know, still apply. So if you haven't run it since 2020, which you could be using 2019, I get that, or a previous release, but this is what they did in 2020. And I love the fact, you know, I don't unfortunately have any unused blocks in here. I've got some layers, but essentially you can visually see what you have checked. And then when you pick purge checked items, it will still bring up the purge this item or skip this item, but it gives you a visual of what you're going to purge. The only thing I warn people about this with is just be very careful what is checked when you originally go into the purge command, because sometimes you might not want to purge something. So I would review that from 2020. They didn't do anything new to it in 2021. What else we got here? I think that's about it. And as I'm sure, not to steal Ashley's thunder, but obviously if you have more questions, you know where to find us. Do you want to take over, Ashley?
Unmuted.
That stuff and how it'll be recorded and all that?
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Yes, if you have questions later that you think of, you can simply reply to that confirmation or reminder email you receive from GoToWebinar, and we can get those to Greg or your sales rep to get those questions answered. Once again, we will have a survey that will just pop up as we close down today. We do ask that you take a few moments to fill that out, and also to remind you that you will receive an email tomorrow with the recording of the presentation. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and close down today. Is that it, Greg?
That's it for me. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.